I know you won't believe me, but I need to tell you what happened last week. It was a Thursday evening, one of those nights so ordinary that nothing seemed worth remembering. The air outside was crisp, with just enough chill to make the windows fog slightly. The street was silent. No cars, no voices, just the occasional rustle of leaves scraping against the pavement. It felt peaceful, or so I thought. I was finishing dinner when the doorbell rang. At first, I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone, and at this hour, the silence outside made the sound seem unnaturally loud. I walked to the door, trying to keep my heartbeat steady. When I opened it, there was no one there, just a package sitting on my doorstep, brown and unassuming, with an Amazon logo printed on it. The label had my name and address. I squinted at it, confused. I hadn't ordered anything. Still, curiosity got the better of me, and I brought it inside. The box felt heavier than I expected. As I peeled back the tape, I couldn't help but notice how cold the cardboard felt against my fingers. Inside, wrapped in layers of crinkled tissue paper, was an old porcelain doll. Its face was cracked in places, its painted eyes faded, one slightly off-center. Something about it felt wrong, but what sent a chill down my spine was the folded piece of paper tucked alongside it. The handwriting on the note was uneven, as if written in a hurry. "Do not open at night." I let out a nervous laugh, but it sounded hollow even to me. Maybe it was a prank or a mistake. Someone could have sent this to the wrong address, right? I set the doll on the coffee table, its tiny face angled slightly upward, as though it were watching me. I told myself I'd deal with it tomorrow. As the hours passed, the house grew colder. At first, I blamed the weather. I even checked the thermostat, which read 72 degrees Fahrenheit, but the chill lingered. The air felt heavier somehow, pressing down on me in a way I couldn't explain. Then the sound started. At first, it was subtle, a faint creak in the hallway, as if someone had stepped too lightly on the floorboards. I paused the TV, straining to hear. Nothing, just the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I told myself I was imagining things. Living alone messes with your head sometimes, right? But the unease grew, creeping up on me in waves. I tried to distract myself, scrolling on my phone, but even then, I felt a sensation like someone was standing just behind me. When I turned around, of course, the room was empty, except for the doll. It sat exactly where I'd left it on the coffee table, but now it seemed different. Its head was tilted, ever so slightly, as if it had shifted on its own. I walked over, staring at it for a moment longer than I should have. Its glassy eyes didn't meet mine directly, but I swear I could feel its gaze. I moved the doll back into the box, shoving the note on top of it before closing the lid. It was just a stupid toy. I repeated that in my head like a mantra. By now, it was nearly midnight, and the quiet outside had turned oppressive. Even the street lights seemed dimmer than usual. Every time I thought about going to bed, I hesitated. The stillness in the house didn't feel normal anymore. Another sound broke the silence, a soft scraping noise, like something being dragged across the floor. My heart jumped. I tiptoed toward the sound, each step slower than the last. The noise was coming from the living room. When I turned the corner, the box was there on the floor, but it was open. The doll was sitting upright, perfectly positioned in the middle of the room, its cracked face tilted in the direction of the hallway. The cold air around me seemed to tighten, and my chest felt heavy, like I couldn't draw a full breath. I didn't dare move closer. My mind raced for an explanation, something rational, but the only thing I could focus on was the note's warning. Do not open at night. I told myself it was a coincidence, a bad joke, maybe even my own nerves playing tricks on me. But as I stood there, frozen, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that whatever had brought this thing to me wasn't finished yet. By midnight, I had given up on the idea of sleeping. The uneasiness in the air was too much, and no amount of scrolling on my phone or pacing the room could shake it. The doll sat on the coffee table, its cracked porcelain face catching the dim light of the lamp. Its painted eyes, faded and uneven, seemed to follow me no matter where I went. Finally, I decided to put it back in the box. Maybe I thought that by tucking it away, I could box up the strange tension along with it. I grabbed the tissue paper, folded the note without looking at it, and placed everything carefully in the box. With the lid firmly closed, I carried it to the front door and left it there, intending to deal with it in the morning. As I turned off the living room light, I glanced over my shoulder. The box sat undisturbed, and I tried to convince myself that everything would feel normal again once the sun came up. But when I returned to the living room a few minutes later, the doll wasn't in the box anymore. My stomach dropped. My first thought was that I had made a mistake. Maybe I hadn't closed it properly, or maybe the tissue paper had shifted. But when I scanned the room, I froze. The doll was sitting upright on the couch. Its cracked head was tilted slightly, the same angle as before, but now it seemed more deliberate. Its lifeless, painted eyes pointed directly at me. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat. I whispered almost instinctively, "What the hell?" The note's warning echoed in my head. "Do not open at night." My rational side screamed for answers. Maybe I had moved it myself and forgotten. Maybe I had imagined boxing it up. I replayed the steps in my head. No, I had definitely put it away. The room felt colder now, and the silence pressed against me like a weight. Then the lights flickered, once, twice, and then settled back into an uneasy glow. I tried to ignore the panic rising in my chest. It was just the wiring, I told myself. Old houses have quirks. But then, every sound around me seemed amplified. The hum of the refrigerator felt deafening, the creaks in the floorboards sharper, and the ticking of the clock unbearable. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My eyes darted back to the doll. Its face hadn't changed, but its presence felt heavier, more intrusive, like it was daring me to make a move. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw something shift. A blur of movement near the hallway. My head snapped in that direction, but there was nothing there, just the dark, empty corridor stretching out into shadow. I turned back to the doll, and my heart nearly stopped. It was now facing the hallway. I hadn't touched it. I was certain of that. The doll's cracked face seemed almost smug now, like it knew something I didn't. My skin prickled, and every instinct told me to leave the house, but my feet wouldn't move. Instead, I stood there, paralyzed, staring at this thing that shouldn't have been able to move, but clearly had. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Of course, there was no answer, just the unbearable silence and the weight of the doll's gaze. I reached for my phone, desperate to call someone, anyone, but the screen was black, dead, even though I had charged it earlier. My hands were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped it. For a brief moment, I thought about grabbing the doll and throwing it outside, but as soon as that thought crossed my mind, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over me, like the very act of touching it again would seal my fate. I backed away slowly, my eyes never leaving the doll. The room felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in, and the note's warning rang louder in my head. "Do not open at night." I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was happening. All I knew was that I wasn't alone anymore, and whatever was in that house with me wasn't going to let me rest. I grabbed my phone, desperate to call someone, anyone, but when I pressed the power button, the screen stayed black. It had been fully charged just an hour earlier, and now was completely dead. My heart raced as I stared at the lifeless device, my trembling fingers tightening around it. Of course, I muttered under my breath, though my voice barely broke the suffocating silence around me. I felt trapped. The logical part of me tried to take over. This was just paranoia, right? But every sound, every flicker of shadow, only made the fear worse. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, its weight comforting in my hand, and decided to check the house. Room by room, I opened doors, shining the light in every corner, every shadow. Nothing. Every window was locked. Every door was secure. There was no one here but me. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The house was quiet, oppressively so, but the air felt charged, as if something unseen was waiting just out of reach. My breathing was shallow, and my ears strained to catch the faintest sound. The flashlight's beam wavered slightly in my unsteady grip. "What do you want from me?" I whispered into the emptiness. There was no answer, but the silence itself felt mocking. as if it knew I wouldn't find peace. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., I heard it, a faint, deliberate knock at the front door. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, it was almost polite, but that made it so much worse. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, staring toward the door like it might burst open on its own. I thought about ignoring it, pretending I didn't hear it, but the knocking came again. 3 soft, deliberate taps. I swallowed hard and forced myself to move. Step by step, I inched toward the door, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The closer I got, the colder the air felt, and by the time I reached the peephole, I could barely bring myself to look. With a deep breath, I pressed my eye against the tiny glass lens. Nothing. The porch was empty. The street beyond was silent and dark, the faint glow of the street lights doing little to illuminate the foggy night. My pulse pounded in my ears, and I almost felt relieved, almost. When I turned back toward the living room, the relief vanished. The doll was gone. I stared at the empty couch, my mind racing. I knew I hadn't touched it. My knees felt weak, and the flashlight shook in my grip. I scanned the room, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow, but the doll was nowhere to be seen. I tore through the house, searching every room again. The box by the door was still closed, untouched, but the doll wasn't inside. It wasn't anywhere. I stopped in the hallway, my back pressed against the cold wall, trying to steady my breathing. My thoughts spiraled. Was this thing even real? Was I losing my mind? Then I heard it, a faint creak, like a floorboard shifting under weight, coming from somewhere behind me. I spun around, the flashlight's beam cutting through the dark, but the hallway was empty. My chest heaved, and I could feel the cold sweat on my skin. I couldn't take it anymore. My hands clutched the flashlight tightly as I backed into the nearest room, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart raced as I leaned against the door, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor. The silence returned, but it felt heavier now, like it was pressing in on me from all sides. I sat there for what felt like hours, listening to every creak, every faint rustle, every sound my own panicked mind might have conjured. But the doll never reappeared. Even now, as I sit here telling you this, I don't know where it went. I don't know what knocked on my door or why. All I know is that something was here, something I can't explain. And I'm terrified that it's not finished with me yet. I haven't seen the doll since that night, but its absence doesn't bring me peace. If anything, it's worse not knowing where it went, or if it's really gone at all. The house feels different now, as if the air itself carries a weight I can't shake. At random hours, I hear faint knocks on the walls or the front door. They're soft, almost hesitant, but always enough to send a chill down my spine. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I catch movement in the corner of my eye, a shadow darting across the room, a flicker of something just beyond my reach. Every time I turn to look, there's nothing there. I've tried convincing myself it's all in my head. Maybe my mind is replaying that night over and over, turning normal sounds and everyday movements into something sinister. But no matter how hard I try to rationalize, the feeling of being watched hasn't gone away. It's subtle, like a presence lingering just out of sight, waiting for me to make a mistake. I've considered getting rid of the box entirely, burning it, burying it, anything to rid myself of its existence. But something always stops me. What if destroying it makes things worse? What if whatever this is doesn't want me to interfere? The worst part is the nights. I avoid sleeping until exhaustion forces me to. Even then, my dreams are uneasy, filled with flashes of the doll's cracked face and those empty, lifeless eyes. I wake up in a cold sweat, feeling as if I've been watched the entire time. I tried talking to friends about it, but how do you even explain something like this? Hey, I think I'm being haunted by a doll that showed up in a package I didn't order. It sounds ridiculous. Even saying it out loud feels like a betrayal of reason. Sometimes I wonder if this is all some sort of elaborate prank. Maybe someone I know was trying to mess with me. But then I remember the way the doll moved, the knocks at 3 a.m., and the oppressive feeling that wrapped around me that night. It doesn't feel like a joke. I've started second-guessing everything. Did I bring this on myself somehow? Is it just paranoia? Or is something still here, watching, waiting? I'm at a loss. I don't know what to do or where to turn. Do I try to ignore it and hope it goes away? Do I call someone, though I don't even know who I could call? Or do I confront it somehow? But how do you fight something you can't see? Something you're not even sure is real? That's why I'm telling you this. I need answers, advice, anything. If you've experienced something like this, or if you think you know what's happening, please let me know. What should I do? Should I get rid of the box? Leave the house? Or is it too late for any of that? Right now, I can't imagine going through another night like that one. The thought of it makes my skin crawl, and the silence in this house feels like it's closing in on me. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Please, if you're listening, tell me what you think. Because I can't keep living like this, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for something to happen, or worse, for nothing to happen at all. And this was one of our followers' stories. If you want your story to be told by us as well, leave it in the comments below this video. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, we prepared the next video especially for you. Click here to watch it.